I met Harry on the first day of our undergraduate Kingston Fine Art course. We were a small group in sculpture, only about 8 of us. And he came round and shook our hand. He was wearing a tweed jacket. And he shook our hands and introduced himself. And so we all thought he was a bit strange. But we all loved him by the end. But he was famous for arriving when the caretakers opened the building at 7:30, whatever, 8 o'clock, and working. Everybody knew how self-disciplined he was and how much work he churned out. And then he'd stop at 4 and go off to the canteen. He would come back for an evening session, probably on his own in the building with the caretakers. So our first impression was a really hard-working person. And of course it paid off because he got a first and then he went to the Royal Academy. So he would get up at 6 o'clock and have a very mindful breakfast that I never witnessed, or hardly ever. And then he would go down to his workshop and you wouldn't see anything of him until coffee time. So he had a rigorous routine. You could tell the time of day by what Harry was doing. So that doesn't sound very artistic, but actually he needed that routine within which to be creative. If he was working in the workshop, you knew that he was concentrating. So if you needed to go and tell him something, you had to announce your presence, your approach. So I would sort of sing as I went down the garden or knock lightly on the side of the shed so that he knew I was coming. So you didn't surprise him so that he would make a mistake. Making a mistake was, on a wood engraving, was always a hazard. He'd do the drawings, but not always too detailed, because he liked to be drawing on the block or drawing with the cutting, because that's the creativity and the excitement. So if the drawing was too detailed, I think that would have been a bit boring to just transfer it. So the creative process was continuing as he was cutting the blocks. Then he would take breaks for his walk up Glastonbury tour, which he did most days. And if he left the back door, I knew he'd be 58 minutes, because he would stride and go the same route and come back again so that he could get back to work, which is what he always wanted to be doing. But it was exciting, actually, living with Harry, because he always had a project on the go. If he wasn't carving, he was engraving, and every job was so different. If we were driving somewhere, for instance, across Salisbury Plain, he'd look at the horizon and say, "Oh, look, there's some engraving trees over there," with a little sort of hump of trees against the skyline. And so, he was looking all the time. And he famously said, you've got to look up when you're, for instance, in a city, because you never know what you might see. He was very practical, and he liked that aspect of wood engraving, being in touch with the wood as a natural material. And when you look at some of his engraving blocks, it's like there's a figure trying to burst out of the side of the print, like they would be out of a block of stone. From a design point of view, his drawing was very three-dimensional, had real form to it, I think. He was a slow reader, so he really did have to put time aside to read. When he first was illustrating books, I would read the book too, but I think I didn't get past the first year of that. I did read Crime and Punishment, though. I remember one print, I think it was in Agnes Grey, there was a cottage, and it must have said in the text that the window was on one side of the door. And Harry did an interior view and the window was on the other side. Would you believe someone would notice that? But I think he got away with it. Harry was working until the day before he died. He was working on a self-portrait. So that's what's set up in the workshop still, is the last print he made. That was him. He worked for as long as he could.
That lovely moment when you peel the paper off a block and see the print round the right way for the first time. There's a lovely professional finish to it, or there can be, that it's harder to achieve with a pencil drawing or a charcoal drawing. So I enjoy that, and the fact that I can reproduce it. It's nice. I can give people a print, or I can sell people a print and still keep the image again. So I enjoy that